Good day. I will be presenting to you our research entitled Examining Online Fact-Checking Programs, Perspective of Social Media Users from Mindanao. This is under the Democracy and Disinformation Project. The January 2020 report of Hootsuite on the state of mobile, internet, and social media users in the Philippines shows that there are around 73 million social media users in the country. With this number, 67% or all of those who have access to internet has also access to social media. With this, social media is an influential platform for Filipinos considering an average usage of 4 hours and 12 minutes and being the top number of users worldwide comprising of more than 73 million users. This means that uh, 68% of Filipinos are users of social media. These users produce and share content in their timelines, including news, which circulated the platform. However, along with the increasing number of users, there is also the rise of incorrect or manipulated content in social media. Sources of this content comes from independent sources, which is individual or partisan supported accounts which raise the issue of biases in mainstream media. This may contribute to the tendency of social media users to share news from independent, non-mainstream sources rather than mainstream press. Last year, Facebook announced its third-party fact-checking program in the Philippines in partnership with Rappler and Verifiles. The fact-checking program aims to prevent false news or fake news from spreading in the platform. But despite this remedy, fake news is still widespread in social media platforms. So what we want to investigate. In light of the influence of human beings in spreading unreliable information, particularly in social media platform, the study intends to determine the perception of social media users in online fact-checking services. Particularly, the project aims to, number one, examine how users perform fact-checking of information they encountered in social media, and second, determine the perceived ease of use, perceived usefulness, and perceived trust of users in using fact-checking services. In a more general perspective, the research is guided by a research question on how do social media users perceive the use of fact-checking services. For our findings, um, we'll start with fact-checking themes and practices that emerge through our focus group discussion and individual interviews. The themes can be summarized into three. First is social media as an information source. Second is information verification practices. And third is sharing of information. Social media as a source of information is a common practice shared by participants during the focus group discussion. As shared by one of the participants, social media keeps them up to date and give numerous and valuable information about their friends and relatives. In this case, staying up to date with news and information around social media is one of the primary information sources among users. As the term staying tuned is illustrate a case of habitual checking of information in social media. It is also apparent that we perceive social media as a source of information for the latest events. Even if social media is becoming to be the source of information and news, it does not follow that everyone who reads news automatically believe it. As shared by the participants, as I am using social media as a source for information, I tend to not believe it yet up until I've seen it to other sources with the same content. So aside from the news, social media has become also the source of entertainment. It became a single source of different media for whatever purposes. That's the reason that social media users tend to go back and check for updates. Focusing on how social media users verify the information they saw in social media facilitates how also misinformation is spread. For instance, during the interview, Codes such as verifying it through references, accounts credibility, and close unknown contacts are one of the reasons on how social media users verify information. I will discuss the details of practices of verification on the next slide. Last is sharing of information. Information sharing in social media is perceived to be sharing of content to other users, either in public or private chat or groups. From the perspective of social media users, they can be classified in our perspective as sharer and verifier. But there's a third one, share to verify. This can be considered as representation of the user. Also, they matter on the motivation of users to share in their social media posts. So let me describe in short detail what we call a sharer. A sharer has a tendency to share information posted in social media without thinking it so much. For instance, the statement, I just always share and share other posts and I don't think if it's fake or true. They are the type of user who has a minimal knowledge on information and awareness of misinformation circulating in websites or social media. On the other hand, the verifier are hesitant and keen to ensuring the truthfulness of the content that will appear on their post. As I've said earlier, this slide is intended to expound on the verification practices of the social media users. Aside from the themes that we've derived, the three themes, we also include particular verification practices. So we identify there are six major classifications. First is cross-checking. Cross-checking is the idea of checking for other sources if you found something in social media. For example, the statement, I now use Google Scholar and other factual and trusted website. This practice is common for all verifier type of user. That means that they will analyze first or check for other information with other sources to verify whether the information they read or encountered in social media is factual. This is also related to the second one, which is source credibility. This is the first action that the user will do once they encountered information posted in social media that it might be true, that might not be true or unreliable, is to check on who posted the information or an image. Source credibility is sometimes related to organization or an account of a certain person. For example, if ABS-CBN, for instance, share certain information, the tendency is that user will automatically believe it's true. But on the other hand, if someone will check who originally posted the image or the information is not reliable, the user will tend not to believe on it. So that's one way to verify whether the information they encounter is worth sharing or not. Third one is checking for comments. An example statement shared by the user about this one is, but my usual or first action is to read comments. So we classify this as one of the practices because sometimes user will not do additional tasks in order to verify the information is correct or not. One user shared us that they just need to check whether the comments, if there are conflicting comments about that particular post. If there are conflicting comments, the tendency is they will verify it to other sources. But if the comments are positive about the post or they agree, that means they have the tendency also to believe it and not to verify this information. The third one is validating information through others. We classify this as one practice because this is not only about um, information post in social media, or the verification practice does not limit the user to be bound on the social media platform. But the common practice for validating information through others is by asking their friend or by asking who among them are using this particular or have encountered this information. The more interesting concept about validating information through others is that If a close relative or a trusted person will confirm that the information is true or not, we have also the tendency to believe that it's true. Now, next is shared by many. Shared by many is parang it's called, if that's the belief of the majority, I will also believe it. This statement is an example of this practice. When many share the post about the information, for me, there is a greater tendency that is true. And last is share to verify. This is somehow similar to validating information through others, but share to verify is the actual sharing of posts to social media groups or even on their personal account. Example of the statement is I shared so that I will know if it's also true. We first check the awareness of social media users in social media. Here, we ask the questions, are you aware of Rappler and Verifiles as fact-checking program of Facebook? We found out that 62% actually are aware of the fact-checking service Rappler and Verifiles, and only 38% out of 685 respondents. However, when we check of the experience in fact-checking program, the result does not follow about their awareness because 54% or more than 54% or less than actually of the social media users who are aware of fact-checking service is not using the fact-checking service. That means 46% also evaluated the fact-checking service. So not all the 600 participants evaluated the perceived ease of use and usefulness of the program. And 8% of that means 8% of social media users are not using fact-checking service despite of their knowledge. For the perceived ease of use, majority of the users actually agreed that the program or the service, fact-checking service, is easy to use. For instance, someone shared that the labeling of the pictures are very helpful in determining whether the picture is actually uh, true or not. So for instance, this example labeled the picture as misleading. It's automatic that if the user encounter this picture, they will remember that this is actually a misleading article. So, but they also suggested that short video clip instead of just text would be very helpful to improve the use of fact-checking service. For perceived usefulness, as expected, majority actually agreed that the fact-checking service or website is useful. But this is less than compared to the ease of use. And also we can note that the 26% disagree with the usefulness of the fact-checking service. When we ask some of them what's the reason why, even if many classified it useful and many classified also that it's easy to use, but for them it's not useful. One of the reasons is that information they encountered in the fact-checking service is too late for them to evaluate. That means it doesn't answer necessarily what we need at this point in time. Most of the fact-checking service posts in social media or on their website is too late for the user to check, although there are helpful items. But when the time you need the information to be confirmed whether it's true or not, uh, it's not yet available at that time. So the tendency the user will have their own way of fact checking the information they encountered. For perceived trust, there is a mix of the result on perceived trust on the fact checking service. In fact, in our survey, only 40% trust the fact checking service, whether it's on Rappler or other item or other fact checking service. And also, if you observe, 44% considered a neutral stand on trust of this fact-checking service. But important things to note is that 25% have perceived trust in Rappler and Verifiles compared to mainstream media. More than 40% of the social media users trusted the mainstream media way of fact checking, except for ABS-CBN, which only 25%, which is almost similar with Rappler and Verifiles, about the fact check they posted on social media or on their website. To summarize our findings, we summarize first, social media users' fact-checking practices includes cross-checking with other sources, reading comments, sharing it, and verifying the credibility of the source. Second is fact-checking service posts and website are perceived to be useful by the user. Third is although more than 50% are aware of the presence of fact-checking program, more than 50% also is not using it. Fourth is that fact-checking post and website is considered easy to use and navigate as perceived by the user. And last, social media users are ambivalent in terms of trust to fact-checking service provided by Rappler, Verifiles, and even mainstream media fact-check posts. That would be all. On behalf of the team, I am thankful for your attention, and I hope that we have learned something about the research